Welcome back, everyone. Hi there. Thanks for joining us again. Simon here. We got Darrin as well again. Multiple sessions this week. You're through. This is number 6 this week. This is great stuff. Just whilst we're getting set up, hi Rob. Hope the weather's good in Rotterdam. Just while we're getting set up, I thought I'd ask you a question. I was going to ask, here we are, which operating system you are all using. And yes, I have discovered a poll system inside the GoToWebinar interface. We've known about it for a while. I prepared these polls and I just forgot to ask you on the last couple of ones. But I just wondered if you wouldn't mind, as a straw poll, what type of OS are you using? And when I say other, I probably mean Linux, especially in terms of Redshift. But we found that a number of broadcasters still have departments that they're using Windows 7. And we're encouraging people to have Windows 10, of course, these days. But just will be a handy piece of info. Hi, Barry. Hi, Matthew. Thanks for saying hi on the chat window. Hi, Stephen. Again, for Toronto. Great. So there we go. Most of you voted. Let's close the poll and show you the results. So it's a reasonably predictable, but it's interesting about the split. Not quite 50-50, but it's an interesting use of that. Maybe later on, if we got a chance, I'll ask you a GPU poll question. Great. So let's just jump back here. What we'll do today is the formal introductions. Hi, I'm Simon Walker from Maxon. I'm the Director of Training, and we're delighted to have, again, Darrin Frankovitz, who is one of our expert trainers here at Maxon. Hi, Darrin.
Hey. Hi, Simon. Hey, everybody.
Hiya. And just the quick thing, if you've attended one of these before, I just wanted to remind you that we're recording the session and you can watch the previous recordings. This all revolves around this PDF that I'm showing on the window, and in here you can link to those recordings. They look like they're going through to the registration page, but just actually click through that and you can access the recordings of all the ones this week. And if you have any follow-up questions, please let us know, training@maxon.net, that comes through to me, and please feel free to reach out. Excellent. So we're moving into more lighting today. I'm going to switch over to you, Darrin.
I'm going to turn off my camera.
I will turn off mine soon as well, make you presenter. Hi, Clinton, back from South Africa. We've got a wide spread of attendees from all over the globe, it seems. Right, let's stop my webcam. I can see your screen.
Okay,
and
wonderful.
Please feel free to ask questions as we go through, and I'll try not to interrupt Darrin too much, but where it's relevant.
So warning everybody, I got a couple cats running around me going a little crazy, so there's that. So welcome. Today it's lighter, that's for you, Simon, than the previous sessions. I'm focusing on lighting, on the atmospheric fog, which I can actually show you the AOV of here. But this file that is actually currently rendering, this is a file that you will be sent a link to download with these textures, so you can use it to explore the materials and the lighting. So have fun with that. But yeah, so the first thing I want to point out is something that I missed earlier, and it's actually, let me pull up the picture viewer so I can point it out, because some people don't notice it. And it's actually in the chain. This ball chain here, it actually sort of melts, or I don't know why I said melt. It turns into bubbles. So I wanted to show how you can access the MoGraph clone color to apply a texture or a material blending. So let's take a look at the material. Let's see. This is it. So opening up that material, I have this basic chrome material. Okay, so I'm blending between two different materials, just this very simple, or actually silver. It's just the preset silver Redshift material. And then I actually have this marble preset, which is actually from one of the Pixel Lab Redshift Material sample packs. And we'll track down that link, which we shared yesterday. We'll get that to you again today. But that is the part of the second material here. But primarily, this is a very transparent thing. So we're going from chrome to bubble, basically. And the blending is actually coming from this user data node. So when you're searching for this node, search for user data, and you'll see color user data. So I'm going to add it, add another one just so I can show you. Let's pop that. Boom, bump. Let's move this over. Let's get the Redshift render view up and rendering with the render region. Okay, so here I just have that basic chain. Let's get in here on it. And, oh gosh, I always struggle with clicking on that edge of the windows to resize them. Let's go original size here. There we go, and then, okay, sorry. Okay, so we can see we have just that chain. I do need to, hopefully that's already here. Yeah, so I'm gonna just turn on the plane effector and the push apart. So we have all of those metal balls just sort of coming apart. And I want those that are coming out to have that, that other material. So in the clone generator, in day one, I did this with a cloner. Here, I'm doing it with a fracture object, so you can see it is doable in light, for example. So the base color of these clones is black, and then that is being affected to from black to white, okay? And that color is basically being used as a mask, which we can get to right here. So with this color user data node selected, I'll just go to this presets button, and then we have all of these preset options. We don't have to type anything out. We just go MoGraph color, and then that is going to be connected to, let's see. You know, I'm having a weird thing right now with my nodes where I can't, this is very interesting. I can't click and drag. I can't click and drag to connect nodes. Let's try this again. Bring it up. Oh. Well, I have never experienced this before. So let's actually stop at that render. But that is how you get to the MoGraph clone color. So if you're applying different, like a multi-shader or color shader, like standard physical render, in Redshift, you instead will use this node with either the MoGraph color or index ratio option selected. And then you can use that as a blending, or there's some other options that we have, which we don't have time to get into.
We had a question from Eric, Darrin, and notwithstanding the current mouse problem, do you prefer this node view?
You know, not right now. It's being a little weird right now. I like how it looks, and there's some ways that like you can drag a node onto a wire and it'll automatically connect it. I like that. There's some navigation things that are, I think, more intuitive and easier. So there are things, so I actually do prefer this the Cinema 4D node interface. I just wish it wasn't so big on my laptop screen.
Got it.
But yeah, and it's, you know, there's a couple of kinks to be worked out in it. So let me, let's see if I can just undo and get back to where that is connected. There we go. And let's see, can I, oh, wow. All right, so I'm just gonna close this. So with that blend active, then we can see, I undid enough that I gotta turn those on. Then we can see how we're going from a chrome to these bubbles, which are pretty difficult to see actually without the lighting. So let's actually now get into the lighting. So this, let's see, is, uh-oh, the cats are messing with their water bowl. Let's see, is this the, yeah, so let me render this so you can see, oh, come on, again with that edge. Let's turn that off. Let's come out here. Give this a second to update. Okay, so this is the first thing I want to talk about in the lighting is this thing that we always, most people anyway, want to do whenever they start getting into lighting and modeling. They want to model a glass light bulb and put like a glowing filament inside of it and use that to light the scene. That tends to create a lot of, not a lot, but it tends to create some problems. So for example, let me turn on my, so I have this glass bulb material. All the lights are off. Let's turn on just the area light that is inside here. Now this is a spherical area light, but I just want you to see how that light is actually coming through this glass. And just so you can see, this is just a regular old Redshift material with full reflection, very, very low roughness. But then we have a almost complete transparency and refraction with a good amount of roughness, okay? So that's pretty much all that's going on with this glass material on this dome. And the light's coming through it, and we can see how it's, you know, sort of acting like I'd expect a light bulb to be. But the problem is it creates a lot of secondary ray noise, and we can see that, you know, with all of this noise here. And those secondary rays is basically the light coming through this refractive surface, and then that refractive surface reflecting on other surfaces, and that just takes a long time to calculate. So, and we're talking like in this scene, let me show you, I actually rendered a simple setup. So here is just that basic glass material with the light inside of it, and it looks great, right? But this took 13 minutes and you can see all that noise. Now, this one took 5 minutes and much less noise. And this is, you know, we're faking it. We're not actually trying to create a real light bulb. Like everything in 3D, we're faking it. So what I'm going to do is show you how to set that up right now. There's a material issue and there's a specific light setting we have to look at. So let's get into it. I'm going to delete all the lights in this scene and render it so you can remember what this looks like without any lights. There we go. And I'm going to add the first light. It's going to be that Redshift area light, and I'm going to name it key. And this light needs to be, let's move it up a bit. This light needs to be a spherical light. So if we look at the general tab for this light, we have, you know, mode, color, but if we scroll down, eventually we'll see the shape, rectangle. I want that to be a sphere. I'm going to turn the size down and check visible. And let's give this a second. There we go. So it's smaller, it's visible. To make this more, so you can see what that light's doing, I'm going to hide the glass dome. There you go. So that what you're seeing right now is just that area, spherical area light. Now, let's turn that dome back on. The first thing that I want to do is get rid of this material on here. Okay, so that is gone. And instead, I'm going to create a new Redshift material and put that on here. And this is going to be an emissive material. So it's going to appear as if it's creating illumination. The problem is, and we'll see this as soon as the view comes back up, the problem is that now that it's no longer transparent, it's blocking the light from my key. So what I need to do is go to the key light, and in its project tab, I need to tell this light to actually not see this glass dome at all. Okay, so you can add as many objects as you want here. And we have the name of the object, the icon of the object, and then to the right are these three little icons that allow us to toggle on or off the illumination. That's the white sphere. The second one is shadows. And then finally is hierarchy. So for more information on that, check out the help system. But I do want to not exclude the illumination from this. So now you see we're getting that light back into here. And now I just need this glass to look more like it's glowing. So to the material, let's move this over here. Now in the material, what I need is an emissive material, and that's actually in the overall properties of the Redshift material. It's this. And I want it to have a natural look, so I'm going to use a Fresnel node to get that look. So I'm going to connect the Fresnel node to the Redshift material overall emission color. And I'm not actually seeing anything, once it updates. And that's because I need to tell the Redshift material right underneath this emission, I need to give it a strength other than 0. I need to increase that weight. So let's put that to 1 and force a refresh here. Waiting for there we go. So now you can see that Fresnel shader in the emission. This is the default Fresnel settings, but I actually want it to be reversed and I want the gray to be black. So I'm going to use a ramp node. So I'm going to search for the ramp, add it, connect the Fresnel to the ramp, and then send the ramp out into the emission color. And then we'll see once that updates that we're getting that natural Fresnel fall off, but it's still not as bright as I want. And that's because I need to invert this ramp. So I'm just going to click on invert. You can alternatively invert the gradient underneath, and then let's just force a refresh here. We'll give it a second. There we go. Now this white is awfully unnatural. So in the Redshift material, I'm going to go to the overall tint, and I'm just going to give it something a bit warmer. And I'm not really going to see it as much as I would like, not until I go to the advanced settings and scroll down to the bottom where there is this overall tint to affect the emission. So once I turn that on and this eventually updates, then there we go. Now you can see it has some of that color. So, so there's my key light, and I'm not bogged down with trying to create a real glass bulb. So this is going to be faster and cleaner in the end. Anytime you're lighting a scene with one small light, and that's it, where there's so much contrast in light and dark, you are going to get a lot of, excuse me, a lot of noise. So I'm going to add a fill light in here, and that is going to be the Redshift dome light. So I'm going to turn off my key and name this dome Sky Fill. Now, by default, it's white, and it, I mean, I guess that's a look, right? But it's not the look I want. I want this to be inside. I want it to be a warm interior. So I'm actually going to load an HDR into this dome light's texture path. So I'm actually going to go to my content browser. It's there we go. And I actually have one that I like. It is, I believe, included in the download, which you'll be able to check out later.
We've got the link of that download also in the chat window.
Good, thanks, Simon. Let's see, so now we can see that, the whole thing's much darker, and that's fine. I'll just go to the exposure setting because it doesn't have like brightness or weight, but there is exposure since it's an HDR, and let's try 1. I mean, really, I don't want this to be too intense because I just want it to be a fill. Now let's turn on that key light. Okay, cool. So now it's filling it in. It's getting a little better. I would like, let's see, in this key light to give it a warmer, more natural color. So I'm actually going to change the mode of this key light here to temperature, and then I'm going to set a temperature that is warmer than what it was. There we go. And now I really want something much cooler in here, maybe to reflect on the tiles a bit. So I'm going to add a third light in here, and that will be another area light. So let's actually, for this, I'm going to switch to the Redshift Viper renderer. So this is actually going to render it in my view. So I'm going to turn off the key and the sky fill, and I'm going to add the Redshift, add another Redshift area light, which I'll name Cool Fill. And I'm okay with this being and then I'll start that Viper. And I am okay with this being a rectangle shape, but I am going to jump out of my camera to the default camera. And then I want to move around, but it's actually not, I'm not seeing anything change in my view, even though I'm clearly rotating. That's because I need to unlock Viper's camera view here. So I'll just click on that, and then it updates. I can see perfect. Now I can move that light back. If you're not sure what you're looking at, let me turn this off. Okay, so let's turn that back on, and I'm gonna move this back, and I'm actually gonna move it over to a corner over here, and then I'm gonna rotate it so it faces, if I can, there it is. Oh, no, didn't get it. I'm trying to click in just the green axis handle. Oh gosh, my mouse sucks. Let's go. There we go. Okay. And it's pretty big. So I'm gonna just click and drag on the little orange dots to bring it down. And you know what? It's a little easier if we can actually see it. So I'm gonna check visible. And there we go. So, the idea here is, I don't know, maybe it's like some sort of screen or a window. that's just sort of outside of the shot. I just want something cool to hit on some edges and stuff. So let's bring it back a bit more and let's give it a cooler temperature. I'm going to go about 19,000 K, and that should be much cooler. Oh yeah, much cooler. Good. Now let's see how this actually looks through the camera. It's pretty intense, so I'm actually going to take down this intensity multiplier. So we don't have, again, we don't have strength here. We don't have exposure. We do have intensity multiplier. Let's try 10. I want it to be pretty gentle there. Now let's try the other two lights, see how they all come together. And that's not bad. I'm happy with that. I'm getting this sort of cool hit on the displacement. It's filling in a bit of these shadows, and overall it's very warm, and clearly the light's coming from the fan. So I'm happy with that. But one of the things that I was asked to do is create a little bit more atmosphere with a little bit of, I don't know, like smokiness, right? Like it's maybe a smoky bar. If I can even remember what those are like. But I want that sort of mystery, right? So for that, I'm going to jump into the Redshift Volumetrics, okay? Now, it's similar to Cinema 4D's native volumetrics in Cinema 4D's lights. You know, you can go to a light in Cinema 4D and add volumetric and you know, we have these options, and we can add noise to them here. It's somewhat limited, and it's actually pretty slow. In Redshift, like everything else, it's super fast. So I'm going to set that up now and give you some tips on how to preview it. Wow, I'm really burning through this stuff. So what do I need? Okay, well, let me get the Redshift render view up here. And I think that's an okay size. We'll start that render. And I am going to go to my key light. Let's say I want this to have the most amount of you know, visible or volumetric light. We go to the volume tab and simply increase the contribution scale from 0 to something. So 0.079 is really low, but we don't really see anything. And this is because there's one more piece to this puzzle, and that is an object from the Redshift menu needs to be added. It's the Redshift environment object. This is what's actually going to show the volume contribution from our lights in our scene. So there we go. Now you can see there we go. It's coming in. We have a very consistent haze here. And I actually want it to be, like I said, more smoky and mysterious. So I need to add some noise to it. There is no noise setting here like we are accustomed to with Cinema 4D's native lights. But what we do have, which I think is more powerful, is a shader that we can create and apply. So in the Redshift, in the Materials Manager under the Redshift submenu, in Utilities, here is a noise volume. Now, this is just sort of like a preset setup. It's just a noise node going into the materials output. And it's not going to the surface, it's going into this volume option. Okay, so I can take this and drag it onto not a light, but the actual environment object. For all I know, I don't know, maybe you can put it on lights, but I haven't tried that. So it's on the environment object. We notice a change here, but it's hard to see what's going on unless we render only the volume lighting. So I've actually set up the AOV for the volumetric lighting. And if, let me show you how you do that in the Redshift menu. You go to the Redshift Aov Manager, and in this left column are all of the default options that you have as, we'll say, multipasses or AOVs. And down at the bottom was volume lighting. If you want to add something to the list, then you can just drag and drop it over, and then you will be able to preview it in the, as we're rendering. So now I'm going to tweak this noise a bit because I want it to be more splotchy. The color I think is okay. Let's try, there's 3 noise types. Let's try fractal. There's no reason why you can't use a Maxon noise instead of a Redshift noise, but I'm going to stick with this. And let's see, I like the fractal. Let's maybe give it a bit more complexity. And I don't know, maybe the scale needs to be tweaked here.
Quick question, Darrin, from Enico, whilst you're doing this. In this method, does the volume noise affect all the volumetric lights in the same way?
I mean, it affects the entire, let's see, this noise does, yes. Because this noise is being applied to the whole environment, not to, one light. I hope that answers the question.
I think so, but let us know, Enico, if that wasn't the right way to ask the question.
Okay.
It does. He says yes.
Okay,
thank
excellent.
you.
You're welcome. Perfect.
Sorry, they say yes.
So I'm tweaking this. I'm sorry, Simon, was there another question you wanted to throw
I've
at
got
me?
a couple of other ones, just general ones, but I don't want to interrupt this section.
Let me wrap this up and then I'll hit you up for those questions, okay? All right. Let's see. So I don't know, not seeing much. Let's try the overall scale. It's like 1/100th of a unit is pretty small. Let's try something a bit larger. But notice how this is actually just a really small change here. And, I am seeing a little bit of, I think I need to play with where the black and white point is. So I'm going to go to this in the color to the remap, and let's bring this up a bit. And that should sort of squash those. There we go. So now we can see those, like those patches, right? And that is much more interesting. Let's go to the beauty pass. There we go. So now we're getting some of that fog there. Now now that noise is already set up, I could, for example, go to the cool fill light that's off outside of the shot, and I can crank up the volume contribution there and see how that comes through. Now it's also hitting the reflection quite a bit, right? Maybe even too much. So I could turn that down, or I could go to the ray and turn down like the glossy there, or render this out in passes and tweak it in post. But I really don't, I'm just to show you that you can, like, it's going to be colored from that cool light and everything. But I'm going to set that to 0. And for the most part, this is basically the lighting that I settled on for this project. Let me show you these render settings here, because I have made some changes. But before I jump into that, Simon, are there some questions that you want to throw at me?
Yes, please. Grayson is asking, are you able to use the newer C4D node system for Redshift? And if so, do you think this is better or worse?
I don't think it's better or worse. did experience a bug or two in this morning's webinar, working with the Cinema 4D node system, and it was primarily when I created a new material in that Cinema 4D node window. I actually already have, let me stop this render, like this material here, and this material, this is the, this is fine. I got no problem working with materials that are already here. The bug is when I created a new one, it actually froze up my Cinema 4D. Now, let me point out that may only be a result of me using an experimental build of Redshift. So I'm actually in Redshift version 3.0.17, which I downloaded from the Redshift website. It's not actually the regular current version that comes, the shipping version that comes when you do the install Redshift option. It's an experimental build, so I think it's a little bit more buggy possibly. But I do like Cinema 4D's nodes. I just wish it wasn't so chunky in my screen. It just takes up a lot of space in my view. But I actually prefer it.
Two reasons you got here, Darrin, to get another plug-in screen. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just put a link to that area on the Redshift website where you can find out more about not only the latest versions but also the experimental version, and we'll put that in the links as well. And since we've had a couple of questions about the Mac version, just wanted to let you know the answer is soon. As you know, we've been working on it for a little while, and we're working hard. But the only thing I can say at the moment is that we're working soon on it, and we hope to have that available to you as soon as we can. So I'm sorry I can't give you any more information about that. But it is a popular question, and it's absolutely right to ask it. I've got a technical question for you as well, Darrin.
Okay, shoot.
In fact, it was a question from earlier on in the earlier session that I thought you gave an excellent response to, which was, rather than using the HDR option, could you have used the Redshift Sun and Sky rig, and what the differences were with the two, and why you creatively chose to choose the way that you did it?
Yeah, so the Sun and Sky rig, I mean, so the short answer is I used the dome light with an HDR because that is how I like working with my projects, whether I'm in Cinema 4D working with PBR materials or not. I like to use an HDR because it's I don't know, I'm used to it. Now, here's the thing. I also wanted an interior, and that sky setup is, it's a sun and a sky. It doesn't really give us, let's see, let's go content browser and open. It doesn't give us all this detail. It doesn't say that there's going to be this type of light coming from, these bulbs or from this fixture, or there's this window with this drape and this color is being cast into the scene. I mean, every single value here creates illumination and, colored shadows, and the sky cannot do that. A sun and sky rig cannot do that, at least not without a lot of messing around with it. So this is faster and easier. And again, I wanted an interior, and this had exactly like the look and the feel that I was going for. So it was, perfect. Why, waste time when I don't want to be fiddling with lights, you know, I spent so much time fiddling with materials, you know. Let's see, but if this were outside, if I was doing like architectural visualization in exterior, then I would, without any doubt, be using that type of sun sky rig. Or if this were an interior through which I was lighting, you know, through a window or some skylights, I would use that rig or an HDR. But for this scene, definitely, I just had to go with this HDR because of its look.
Absolutely. A follow-up, Larry's asking, I think this might be something you're getting into, Darrin, but he's asking about sample counts for individual lights and how much those matter, or do you just generally use the unified sample overrides?
Yeah, so that's actually, what I was about to get into was the render settings. So whilst Simon was asking me some questions, I did actually create a new render setting named Redshift Defaults. And this is the default Redshift render settings. So let me pull this over here, and let's start this render. I'm gonna do a render region for this. So we'll get sort of this brightly lit bit, this dark shadow corner, this reflection, a bit of this transparency. And we'll let this render for a couple of passes. So at the default settings, it's actually not bad. There is a good amount of noise here, and it's just awfully dark in these areas. So because of this darkness, I also actually ended up using some global illumination. So in the Redshift render settings in the GI tab, I actually used for both these primary engines, excuse me, for both these engines, primary and secondary, and that's basically like the bounce, like the first bounce and then all the other bounces after that initial. I did brute force for both of these. And then I did increase the number of bounces. But really so much energy is lost, you know, beyond a fourth bounce that, you know, we can save some processing and leave it at 3 or 4, whatever. But the most important setting after you choose brute force is really just the number of rays. 16 is, you know, really low, and it can create some noise that we don't see, and we're actually not seeing it yet. And it can create actually some noise that we can't fix elsewhere. And I'll get there in a second about that other noise. But to actually see that GI a little more clearly here, I'm going to turn on the bucket rendering. And
since mentioning GI, Darrin, a quick question from Mike is, could you quickly touch on the different GI engines?
You know, I don't really want to get into that right now, but so there's like in the Cinema 4D's native GI system, you can choose, there's a couple of options for the primary GI bounce, and then some other options for the secondary. So let's see, we have photon, irradiance, and brute for primary, and okay, we have the same for secondary. There's some other options in Cinema 4D's native renderer, which Redshift doesn't have, but that's absolutely fine. The brute force is, as the name suggests, brute force. It's, you know, it's just like per pixel, basically. The irradiance cache is very much like Cinema 4D's native irradiance cache, in which it's, you know, a more intelligent, like tossing of samples into the scene, and it's looking at where areas have more detail or less detail, and it's putting more samples here versus there. That's the idea behind an irradiance cache. Photon map, I don't know. I really only use that with caustics. So yeah, I'm not really the I'm not the big GI guy, but I know that I like brute force for this one. Let's turn that down. So sorry, that's not, you know, not a very detailed answer. But what you can do is you can always go to your Redshift menu and go to Help, Online Manual. And then here you can go to that global illumination, and it'll actually break down the engines, and you know, there's just a whole bunch of, everything is documented very well. So I suggest that.
Excellent. It's also useful to know which one you prefer. I think that's quite handy too.
You know, I tried using the cache, but you know, I'm just not, I don't do enough GI renders to be comfortable to not spend like, you know, another hour or two tweaking, here we go, the irradiance cache settings. You know, number of rays, adaptive amount, error threshold, distance threshold, color min, max. I mean, there's just a lot more to be concerned with in an irradiance cache. So I liked brute force for its simplicity. And if it was too noisy, then I would just increase the number of rays to, you know, I actually ended up with 2048. Let's go there. But that only actually smooths out literally the GI. So if, I don't have that pass here. Let's go Redshift, Aov Manager. Let's get the global illumination in here. There we go. And yeah, we'll close that. I think it's going to need to probably render the buckets for us to see that GI.
Another question from Eric, sincere
Yeah.
on that. There seems to be a huge difference between progressive render and bucket render. And just could you talk about that?
So progressive render, like in Cinema 4D's physical render, it's perfect for previewing. You know, we do not use progressive render for our final renders, or on very rare occasion, I should say, would you use a progressive render as your final renderer. And so that being the case, the bucket renderer, you know, may take a little bit longer. Not a big deal. Redshift's still super fast, but also because the whole idea behind the progressive render is that it's, you know, faster. It's more for previewing, for interactively lighting, tweaking materials, that type of stuff. There are some effects that aren't calculated in the progressive render to keep it fast, like photons. You know, if you're doing caustics, they will not appear in the progressive renderer. I'm, you know, not sure if I'm really getting much. Yeah, there's just a bit of GI coming through here. That's interesting. And that's in, you know, the bucket mode. So another thing is with the progressive renderer, it's only going to progress so many times. That's this number of passes. So let's actually take a couple minutes here and talk about these basic sample settings, because they are important. So right off the bat, let's actually turn off bucket and the render region. So right now I'm in the progressive renderer, and what's going to happen is this whole scene is going to be rendered basically 1024 times, and then it's going to consider it done. And each pass will have a minimum of 4, a maximum of 16 samples with this error threshold. The larger the threshold, the more the larger the threshold, the less likely it is that a detailed area will receive the maximum number of samples. This is really low. I'm going to crank this up to 1024 and set that minimum to 32. And this actually is a little bit faster. There's actually some mathematics going on behind the surface here, where even just because you have low values doesn't mean it's going to render faster. And let's see, we'll track down a link and we'll send that out to you guys. But it's, you know, it's pretty complicated. Anyway, so this unified sampling, it's essentially, you can think of it as like the anti-aliasing, okay? It's more about anti-aliasing than getting rid of the grain and noise from like color values. Although it does accomplish that if you crank this up enough, it really, really hits the render time. What's better, rather than just cranking up the maximum samples across the board for the whole scene, is to just say in the sampling overrides to go to, like, I have a lot of reflection here. I'm going to replace all of these materials reflection samples values with 2048. And I'm going to do the same thing for the refraction. Having more light samples helps also, so I'm going to crank that up. And I'm using volume. I think I'll do the same there. And I'll just leave it at that. I could set this up to the error threshold to 5, and that will help favor the lower ends, the minimum samples. And we'll see my GI is on. And let's see, let's do a bucket render. But you know, that's what I ended up doing, rather than using these sampling overrides. So that way I didn't have to worry about going into like this material. And like, let's see, there's so many places where we have samples for this reflection. Let's see, does Fresnel, no. You know, there's just so many nodes, so many materials, and then there's, you know, the lights. So I like to use that sampling override option. Now, let me point out, in this experimental build, if you go to the system properties, there is, under experimental options, an automatic sampling. But sorry, Simon, you were about to ask a question.
There's a bunch of questions that come in on this subject. I think you've hit a popular area.
Good.
Since you mentioned sampling, how long did the final render take with the sample settings?
On my machine, it was somewhere between like 12 and 18 minutes at it was 1080p. That was with my sample settings, which you just saw, not the default ones. Let me bring that. Where's my picture here? Bring that up. Yeah, that was this render. I think that was about 20 minutes, and that might have been also because I had some caches saved, so some things didn't have to be recalculated. I don't know.
This might feed into Spencer's question, actually, about he says that the normal way to reduce noise in the Redshift bokeh effect is to increase max camera samples. And is there a better way to reduce noise in the outer focus areas?
Oh, that's a really good question. And the short answer is, I'm not sure, because I don't do a lot of those really dramatic depth of field renders where they're really blurry, which would create a lot more noise. So my Yeah, so you already have a little bit more experience with that type of noise than me, but it sounds like it may actually, um, hmm, I don't know, that's a post. Yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry. I would suggest checking out the help uh, for that one.
We do have a series of webinars that we're planning at the moment that go into more of those noise reduction processes. So that also will be something that we'll cover on follow-ups. Thanks for your question also, Thomas, about the denoising. That also seems to be a top popular topic for this.
Was that were there any other questions?
I I've got a question from earlier, which you gave a fantastic answer for about displacement in the preview, or previewing it in the
Oh,
viewport.
yeah.
I'd
Okay.
love you to show that little trick again if you've got a few minutes. And
Yeah,
then a
so
follow-up one,
mhm.
Vladimir's asking, which might be more of an open-ended question, but he says, can you tell me, are there better results to gain from Redshift than from the physical renderer?
um, it does come down to you and how you work with it. Um, so like, look, here's the bottom line. Until Redshift became a part of the Maxon family, I was always using the standard and actually the physical renderer, and it was so slow, but I loved the results. Okay, it looked, gorgeous. Um, but when I switched to Redshift, I was like, oh man, I'm just not really happy with how this looks. I don't really like it, but it is really fast. I mean, I was just learning it, you know. So, but it's actually pretty quick to pick up. Um, and it is, for me, it's faster and I'm able to accomplish things with Redshift in a more straightforward way, I think, than with the physical renderer. Um, and let's see, I sort of lost the question as I was speaking. Did I answer the question?
That's a good start. I mean, that's a whole conversation, I think, as well. The other thing I wanted to encourage you to do is just to talk about that viewing displacement for those tiles actually in the viewport and your little
Cool.
workaround for that.
So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to stop this and I'm going to click on this icon to just do a one-off render. And I'm going to let this go in the background. We just have a couple minutes left, so we'll see how much of this gets done in that time. But here's the thing. Cinema 4D's native material system actually has options to give us a preview of displacements in our viewport without having to render. Redshift, on the other hand, does not. So what I did was I took advantage of one of Cinema 4D's deformers to create one version of the tiles in my view. And let's see, there we go. So let's go and see. So I basically copied the cloner that I had um, that's being rendered because this is what it looks like in the editor view. Okay, so the plane has 3 segments, 3x3. It's cloned, the material's on there with the displacement, but we cannot preview it. So what I did was I copied that. The original one, I hide it from the view, and then the copy I make visible in our view, but off to the renderer. That's visible in editor, visible in renderer. It's also the green dot is, visible. Red dot is not. That's anyway. So this one that is visible here has that same plane, but with a displacer deformer. And in that displacer deformer, I've loaded that same displacement texture map. And then I did have to increase the segments because at the default segments of 3x3, what's that? That's useless. There's just not enough geometry to deform. So I increased the segments to 100 by 100, and that gave me, enough information that I could get a preview in my editor view. So this one Tintile's viewport is only visible in the view, but whenever I click render, then the Tintile's renderer is what we see. So that's like my workaround. Yeah.
Nice.
And sorry.
Do you have a couple of follow-ups? I know we're racing up to the top of the hour. Drake had a good comment about Vladimir's question of physical render versus Redshift, and he's talking about it being much faster and you can view changes in near real time. But would there be other things you could, in general, you would consider, Darrin? Not to make this a cage match between physical renderer and Redshift. We sort of introduced it as one, though, I suppose.
It's interesting because Jonas, when in his last webinar, he actually showed, a really interesting workflow of actually combining passes from different renderers. So it actually doesn't have to be all or nothing, although make it easier in setup. I don't know. For me, I just love Redshift. It's so fast. I feel that it is easier to pick up. It's more straightforward. There are fewer things that I have to fight with in the Redshift Material system compared to Cinema4D's material system, where you have color and then diffuse and then reflection and specular, and it's not specular like we see here, where this is actually the reflection. So I prefer Redshift for sure, and it is faster, like you said.
Well, as Drake is reminding me, absolutely, that it's his comment about being so much faster, 300 to 900%, and he's wanting to say that's not hyperbole on his part. He finds it so faster in many circumstances, or as he says, in every circumstance. So thank you for that, Drake. Can you squeeze in one quick answer before we go?
I can. Let me say this real quick, that I had the most basic example file of like a white sculpture in plain backgrounds, and I rendered that with a physical renderer and Redshift renderer with the same material, same light. And the physical renderer took like 5 minutes, and the Redshift renderer took like 10 seconds. So it's real, the speed difference is real and it is dramatic. So yeah, go ahead, Simon, with that question.
It was a quick one from Barry about, is it not better to do blurring after a full render?
It is certainly faster. You can iterate much more quickly on that blur or the look of it in post. And there's a lot of really excellent tools in Red Giant's suite that you can get some amazing results from. I'm not in a position to demo those right now, but it's down to you. Now, if you do it in the actual render, then you're taking advantage of it being like physically accurate rather than a post effect. And that may just sort of be, these days, it may be a bit of a red herring, quote unquote, physically accurate. Like, what's it matter? The only thing that really matters is how it looks in the end, right? So, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if I answered that question.
No, that's good, and that leads into a good segue that I could do actually. Can I just take over your screen for a second? Darrin.
Yeah, you want me to stop sharing, or do you want control of my mouse?
I can grab it if you want. I just didn't want to just grab it
Go
without
ahead.
asking you. All right, okay.
Go for it.
The let's just go and share, make sure I'm showing my screen. Great. There's interesting how much you can fit into just a single hour. And I love how we've had the whole series of questions coming through. And I think that's what makes these as well. And I know it's steered you off topic slightly, but that's the wonderful thing about these webinars and the ability to ask you questions live. And I've really enjoyed actually your interpretation of those different settings. And I think that is, I know that the help system is useful, but how you use it is invaluable.
Yeah, and you hit something on the nose right there. A lot of what you are hearing coming out of my mouth is, in fact, my interpretation. What I'm sharing with you is just that. It's not like, word for word how things are. This is my understanding of it, and how I express it. So definitely, you will find your own ways and your own words that will work for you. But yeah.
Absolutely. And we appreciate, we got a few final questions coming in, some comments about the speed being the important thing without too much time wasting doing test rendering. Thanks for that, Eric. And these are the sorts of things that it's nice to delve into a conversation like that, and we only have a kind of limited time on each particular webinar. But I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, for all these questions and for pointing things out like the noise and the blurring, because we've got more of these coming, and those are excellent things to make sure that we include in them. So,
right there, I want to point out, sorry, Simon, to interrupt you. The final render took 7 minutes and 21 seconds.
Is that using Redshift?
Yeah, remember how just a moment ago I said, I'm going to set this to just do a one-off render.
All right, got it.
And let it go. And that took 7 minutes and 21 seconds, and it's done. That was with the GI and the 2048 additional samples on reflection and light and everything. So that would have taken, I don't know, 2-4 hours with the physical render.
Goodness.
Yeah.
There's your reason. Right there. Measured in hours now. Exactly. Excellent. So thank you again, everyone. Thanks for bearing with us for going slightly over. One day we'll do it in an hour. But I understand that some of you have mentioned that you'd be happy to stay here for many, many hours to talk about these things, but we also know that you've got other things to do and perhaps other meetings to go to. But please continue to be in contact and message us at training@maxon.net. You'll get all the links that Darrin's been talking about. Please feel free to download that file that he prepared for you. And just let us know what you'd like to see, because that's the whole point of these sessions. If you have a team of users, then we have been running these sessions as a complementary part of the team license. So that's another reason why we wanted to share the sorts of depth that we get into. So let us know if that would be useful for your team. And also thank you for the nice comments from everyone. And the important questions about when the Mac version is going to be available. Yes, thank you for bearing with us. Thank you for your patience. And also, I just want to say thank you to you, Darrin. This has been fantastic for all your sessions this week. And I know how much work has gone into the background. And it's just nice to see, even in your throwaway comments, about how much knowledge you've got in this area. So it's wonderful for us to be able to look in and see your creative approach.
I fooled you all.
Yes, that's right. All those decades of learning just to fool us.
Thank you, Simon. Did you want to show the final render, or you good?
Why not? Let's do that. I'm sure we do. Let's change back to you. Feel free to dive off if you've got a meeting to go to. We're just for another 1 minute tops. We'll just show the final render just to take you the full way through that process.
I thought you could just pop it up and then end on that frame.
Yep, absolutely. So I've sent it over back to you. Here we are. Lovely.
Cool. Thank you, everybody, for coming, for your questions. Thank you so much, Simon, for asking me to do this, and it's been really fun.
Oh, you're most welcome. Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Feel free to reach out, and we'll see you on the next one of these. As Drake says, it takes a long time to become an overnight success. Absolutely. All right. Stay healthy, everyone. All right. Take care. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.